Sheds are bad, okay? Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below, and it's going to give you a pretty good sense of what we do here at the Horror Movie Syllabus. In short, we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we look at 3 movies from that subgenre, but not today, because today is our Is It Syllabus-Worthy series. This is where I take a recommendation from you guys, a horror movie that I've never seen before, that you recommend to me in the comments to one of my videos, then I watch it for the first time and I let you know, is it syllabus-worthy? Is there something about it that makes me feel like it's worthy of being on the horror movie syllabus? And today, the recommendation we're going to look at is The Shed. And The Shed was recommended to us by Castellar Daniel Garcia, who recommended this to us in our occult video. But it's worth noting that Castellar gave us a list of movies, a huge list of movies, to his recommendations in this video. So not all of them were, in fact, most of them were not occult related. So that wasn't a clue at all. And to be fair, Castellar's list had a ton of movies on it that I had already seen before, many of which were already on the horror movie syllabus. So it goes to show that the list is quality for the most part. There's a lot of really good movies on there that are worthy of being on the horror movie syllabus. But this is one that I hadn't seen before, that I had actually heard of and hadn't had a chance to check out yet. But I didn't know much about it. And so I went in basically blind. Didn't know anything other than Castellar's recommendation. And did I like it? Did I hate it? Let's find out. Like I said, the movie that we're looking at today is The Shed. The Shed came out in 2019 and was written and directed by Frank Sabatella, who adapted the story from a short story by Jason Rice. And it is a interesting story that they were able to turn into a full-length feature movie without it feeling too much like stretching things out, which is oftentimes a problem for short stories that get turned into movies, is that it feels like there's a lot of padding. But in this case, it wasn't too much of a problem for Sabatella, who, as far as I can tell, is just kind of known mostly for B-movie horror movies, like Blood Night and stuff like that, stuff that I'm not terribly familiar with. And so this is probably the most noteworthy movie of his, and it is pretty noteworthy. So if you haven't seen it before, the movie follows a teenage boy who has some behavioral issues and gets bullied a lot at school, and also gets bullied a lot at home by his grandfather, because he's an orphan and he lives with his grandfather. And he winds up one day discovering that a vampire has been trapped in his shed because of the sunlight. He can't get out, and he locks the vampire in there. And of course, the bullies and his friends and everybody kind of wondering what's going on and get curious about that shed, and hijinks abound. But we're going to go ahead and stop there so as to not spoil the movie. But this movie gets a whole lot out of what is essentially a very simple, basic premise. The idea of a vampire being trapped in a shed because the sun has come up is fairly simple, not really terribly a lot of depth or places to go narratively with this. And I've never read the short story, so I can't say where it goes there. But it's a premise that is simple, but they get a lot of mileage out of this. It's really interesting to see how the setup leads to where the movie winds up going. And the movie, to its credit, tips its hands early about it being a vampire movie. Like, I'm telling you guys that because I don't feel like it's a spoiler, even though I didn't know that going in. So I was surprised, but like within the first 3 minutes, you find out that this is a vampire movie, because you see the vampire who gets trapped in the shed right off the bat, and you know he's a vampire. So it's not a surprise, or it's not a spoiler to say that this is a vampire movie, and that is a big part of what this movie hinges on, is being a vampire movie. I also like that the movie gives us a lot of the rules that are relevant to the movie pretty early on. Like, it's quick to be turned into a vampire. The transformation happens pretty quickly. Sunlight does, in fact, harm you. It doesn't seem like you need an invitation to get in, and there might be some mind control or persuasion stuff going on. So it's giving you enough of the vampire lore right off the bat to understand the rules for this movie. So it's getting you right into it. It's getting right to the chase pretty darn quickly. When you get to your lead guy, this bullied teen, he feels pretty relatable. He's a very accessible character, and the idea of him being kind of beaten up or maligned or abused or all of the above, and then suddenly finding the power of a vampire in his shed is an interesting angle. It leads to this really potential exploration into some potentially dark things. We'll touch on that a little bit later. The setup of the boy, though, works pretty well because they've set up that his home life is bad, his school life is bad. He's got one really good friend, and then the girl that he likes, of course, is with somebody else now. They used to be together. So there's a lot of this like school drama and teen drama that's built into it that surprisingly works pretty well, even though we want to get to is the vampire. They go to great lengths to kind of give you the backstory and the situation of this kid, which I think is important for justifying what happens next, what goes on in the movie. You kind of need to know what this kid's life is about. And I'll be honest, it's almost comical how bad his life is. It's almost insanely ridiculous how bad his life is. But that winds up again making you feel sympathy for him, making you care about him, making you be on his side, which is important for how the movie goes. Now, it's interesting because they've gotten some solid actors here to play the roles, but at first I wasn't too sure. When the movie starts, it starts out with the boy waking up and his parents are there, and everybody's playing it really big and kind of almost caricature-y, almost campy. And I was just like, oh, I'm in for a bad time because this acting is horrible. It's very performative, very theatrical. Turns out that's like a dream sequence, and the real acting is much more grounded and more realistic. J.J. Warren, who plays the lead boy, giving a really authentic feeling performance. And it's worth noting that Frank Sabatella, the director, has cast people who are actually the age of the characters. He actually went out of his way to cast real age actors to give the movie a little bit more authenticity. And I think it is effective here because they come off like actual high school students, and I believe in it. And it's just a credit again to Sabatella, who's shot a really good looking movie here. The movie is competently shot. It's clean looking. It has a modern feel to it. It's nothing amazing. It's not like the cinematography is going to blow your mind, but it's also not going to take anything off the table either. He's doing a really good job here of making this movie look good, making it look like it's got a little bit of money, making it look like a real Hollywood type movie, even though I get the sense it's actually much more of a low budget affair. And then he's gotten really capable, qualified actors to be in this movie. And then he also got a couple of minor recognizable names to kind of round it out and give it a little bit more authenticity or a little bit more legitimacy. He's got Frank Whaley here, the very notable character actor. You probably seen him in things like Pulp Fiction, whatever. You would definitely recognize him. He's only in it a little bit. Like, I feel like maybe he only had a couple days on set, probably. But to get him is a pretty impressive thing. And then they got Siobhan Fallon Hogan, who does a lot of work with Lars von Trier. You'd probably recognize her as well, especially if you watch Lars von Trier movies. So these are like, real actors, if you will, that are giving the movie a little bit more weight, a little bit more clout, if you will, as a legitimate production. And it works really well because the dynamics between these characters and the teenage actors works great. Like everybody's very believable here. And the way that they've established a relationship, especially the relationship between our main guy and his best friend, works out to be pretty good because that's how they can deliver a lot of exposition in ways that feel very natural because the conversations feel very natural. So like when he's arguing with his friend about things, the exposition that's being delivered, the history of this guy's life, it feels normal because this is kind of the way that they might argue about that and kind of talk about these things and these issues. So I bought into that. Now, there are some other examples of exposition in the movie that are a little more clunky. Like there's a scene where he's watching a TV movie, or watching like a vampire movie on TV, and it's kind of giving the rules of the vampires for him. So that felt like a little more ham-fisted, admittedly, but it's minor nitpicks because overall the movie looks good, the movie is being acted well, and it's got a pretty interesting premise that I'm very curious as to where it's going to go. And where it goes might be a little bit of where there's a bit of a problem for this movie because I feel like this movie leaves something on the table in terms of its potential. So what you've got is this vampire trapped in a shed, and he's very animalistic. It's not really like, Dracula or the sexy vampire like the Lost Boys or something like that. It is treated more like he's almost like a monster, like an animal, really. And the idea of like, can this animal be trained is an interesting one that gets brought up. It's an interesting take that gets brought up, but doesn't really get explored as much as I would like it to be explored. So what you have is you have this main guy who's bullied and his best friend who is bullied even worse, gets beat up a lot in the movie. His best friend whose name is Dahmer, and yes, it's very on the nose, that name, but whatever. And he's really the most interesting character in this movie. And I wish they'd given us more of him. That's where I feel like the missed opportunity was in this movie because the bully revenge angle is a really fresh idea. The idea that bullied teenagers might try to use a vampire to get revenge on their bullies is a really, really cool idea. Even though it's flawed logic, right? The idea that you can take this monster and convince him to do your bidding is kind of a dumb idea, but it's a forgivable flaw in logic because it tracks the character. They give you enough of Dahmer's character to make you believe that he believes that this would work. And does it work? Well, I'm not going to spoil that so much, but it's interesting because you've got these characters and their conversations and they're carrying this movie along pretty capably so that when you get to this point, you're believing where it's going. You buy into this being the natural conclusion of their thoughts. Again, I'll credit the actors for doing a really solid job here, being very believable, and I'll credit the director for getting the performances out of them. This works, and again, he wrote this too. He did this, and this is where probably the short story got fleshed out a little bit more, and it works. It works really, really well. But I really would have liked to have seen this go farther. I really think you had an idea of going into some really kind of taboo, dark areas where, instead of like a school shooter, you've got a kid using a vampire. That is interesting. But the movie pulls back from that. It doesn't go 100% of the distance. And I feel like you left something on the table there. You had potential to make something really eye-opening, really popping, really surprising, and you kind of pulled the punch a little bit. And that really kind of undercut the whole success of the movie because I thought that's where it was going to go and I got really excited. And then it kind of went a slightly different direction instead, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but it wasn't what I got excited about. And so I felt slightly let down that it didn't go the direction that I was thinking it was going to go. But is that letting down enough to keep it out of the syllabus? Let's find out. So, is The Shed syllabus worthy? Not quite. Mostly though because of stiff competition, less because of it not doing what I was hoping it was going to do. More just because if you're trying to make it a vampire movie, you're trying to get into the vampire subgenre of the syllabus, there's just too many bangers in there. There's too many excellent movies. And this one is merely good. It's a good movie. It has some really good vamp scares in it. It has some pretty cool action. It's got a cool final act. But admittedly, I'm a kind of an easy lay when it comes to vampire movies, so I'm easily pleased with those things. So maybe other people's mileage might vary on that one. Their standards might be a little higher, but I found this to be very entertaining and very fun as a vampire movie. Just not going to be on the upper echelon with some of these other great movies. Things like Lost Boys, Let the Right One In, things like that. It's not going to make the cut, frankly. Now, there is a really cool angle here with this kind of like bullied kid and the idea of getting revenge on his tormentors that is outstanding. And honestly, if it had taken it farther, like I talked about, then we'd be having a different conversation right now. Because then it would be a very bold and exciting and taboo, dark idea that I would be blown away that somebody had the nerve to do. But again, it pulled its punch there, so I can't give it full credit for that. I like that it introduced the idea. It's a really cool idea, and it kind of played with it a bit. It explored it to a certain degree, but it fell short of going all the way with that. And had it gone all the way, I think I'd be trying to find a better place for it on the syllabus. I would be fighting for it to get on there. But as a result, I'm just going to merely say it's a pretty good movie. And it's gotten average to good reviews. It's not a movie that has a big reputation or anything like that. The reviews, I read a few of them after watching the movie, and they're solid. They're decent. People seem to enjoy the movie just fine. A lot of people compare it to Fright Night, which honestly I wouldn't have thought of, but I can kind of see it. I guess I can kind of see it. Not nearly as good as Fright Night, to be honest with you. Not nearly as clever, not nearly as charming. But I can kind of get the idea with the lead actor and with kind of the idea of like a vampire next door and stuff like that. I see some of the similarities to Fright Night, but I feel like that's a little bit of a stretch. And honestly, if you're reading those comparisons, don't expect Fright Night because I think then you'll be disappointed. But I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. Actually, I enjoyed it a lot. I had a lot of fun watching this. It was, again, I like vampire movies, so it's right up my alley. But just because I enjoyed it, it wasn't enough for it to fight its way onto the horror movie syllabus, unfortunately. And again, that's not an indictment on the movie itself. It's just, sometimes the syllabus is hard to get on. But in this case, if you like vampire movies, this one's definitely worth a watch. If you're not into vampires, I don't know that this one's going to necessarily change your mind or anything like that, but it's got a really good teen drama. It's got a cool vampire idea in it, and it's worth the time. So if you get a chance to check it out, I would definitely say check it out. And now it's a good time to check out a horror trivia pursuit card. It's that time in the video where I like to look at a card and answer it here on camera live, and hopefully not get it wrong and embarrass myself. And since we're talking about a vampire movie, we're going to look at the monster category on the card. And here's our question. What is the name of the pub that protagonist David Kessler visits at the start of 1981's An American Werewolf in London? And I'm like 95% sure that I know the answer to this question because I love that movie and I've seen it a number of times. And it's not just a sign that you'd have to notice at the pub, but it also they draw attention to the sign. They actually kind of make a little bit of a joke about it and everything. So it's kind of memorable in that sense because it actually is referenced directly in the movie. There's a clue for you, I guess. But that movie is I love it. It's one of my favorite movies. It maybe is my favorite werewolf movie of all time, and I have fond memories of it. I think I probably because I talked about it on the channel, of course, and I probably told the story before. But like when I saw it, like I saw it at my grandparents' house, and I loved it, but I was totally freaked out. And then my grandfather dared me to like go and check the front gate's lock and make sure it was locked. And I was like terrified to go outside. I was convinced I was going to get attacked by a werewolf. So I kind of have a fond memory of that movie, like tied to my childhood. So there's a nostalgia aspect to it as well. But it is a bona fide great movie. It's often considered to be one of the greats. Has that great transformation scene. But this movie has that pub towards the beginning of the movie, and it is, if you're a horror fan steeped in this kind of lore, you're in this movie, probably not that hard to remember this one. But I'm guessing if you're not, or if you haven't seen the movie for particular, you're just taking a shot in the dark, and that's okay. Take a guess. Maybe it'll be an interesting guess, but maybe you'll get it right even. But I'm going to go ahead and say my guess. It's again, I'm pretty certain. I feel pretty confident in this one, but lock in your answer because I'm about to give my answer. Okay, so my answer is the slaughtered lamb. And I'm almost positive I'm right on that, but let's check the card. And it says the slaughtered lamb. Yes. Yeah, like, they have that sign there that shows it. It's kind of gruesome looking, and it's like very off-putting because it's just the start of the movie. And you're like, what the hell is this pub? What is this? And of course they go there and everybody's super weird. So it works out really well. But yeah, that's a kind of a memorable thing. It sticks out in your mind, or at least it stuck out in my mind. So what did you guess? What were the answers you guys guessed? If you had wrong answers that were funny, let me know in the comments because I get a kick out of those. But that's going to do it for our video. Thank you guys very much for hanging out to the end. Thanks to Castellar for giving us this recommendation. It's a good one. Definitely check it out. But if you've got other recommendations, of course, leave them in the comments. You can add them to the list if I haven't seen them before, and perhaps I'll do a video on that in the future. But until then, I'm just going to say, class dismissed.